been warning you over the last year or two repeatedly that the pandemic facing America that could end our nation as we know it isn't COVID. It's critical race theory and its cousins, queer theory, whatever variation of the repackaged Marxism that's being foisted upon us is. And it is the core value of the Biden administration. It is the core value of many corporations. It is infecting our schools. It's being imposed on our military. And it's Marxism. It's anti-Americanism. It relies on racism to advance its agenda. It is something that is revolutionary in concept because at its heart, critical theory suggests that America's founding and all of our institutions since then have been thoroughly corrupted by either racism, homophobia, lack of equity, you name it. And if we're systemically racist, that means the institutions are illegitimate and they need to be overthrown, right? That's what makes it Marxist, that's what makes it communist, and that's why they're using it to try to destroy America and overturn the system. And so they're targeting our children, as Judicial Watch has exposed. They're using, most recently, President Biden, for instance, there was a rule passed bipartisan, a bill passed on a bipartisan basis out of Congress that would have overturned a Labor Department rule under the Biden administration that would have allowed investors or fiduciaries to use essentially your pensions and other investments to fund critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion. They've got all these hot button words for it, but essentially it's Marxism, okay? So they want to use investment dollars, your pensions, your 401ks, et cetera, to fund the left, to fund the Marxist agitators that want to overturn our system. And the Biden administration had tried to impose and has imposed a rule allowing that to take place, allowing these investors like BlackRock and company and other folks who have access to your assets to misuse your money and hijack your money for these nefarious ends. And Biden vetoed that. He vetoed an effort to pull that back. It's just a further indication of just how extremist the Biden administration is in pushing this critical race, I'm going to call it critical Marxist theory agenda. And it's happening in our military. And I want to be clear here. Our military leadership is attacking America and training our rising leadership in the military to be anti-American. That's what critical race theory is about. And can you think of any more dangerous situation over the medium and long term? Well, we've been working to expose this abuse of our cadets and our young folks in the various military academies. And obviously those who are enlisted or who aren't even in the military academies are being force-fed this critical race theory propaganda training. So we've sued specifically the various academies, the military academy at West Point, which is the Army, and then the Navy Academy, and the Air Force Academy. So we have a few lawsuits against the Air Force Academy, including an important one with our friends at STAR, which is the Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. STARS is a great group that includes former officers. I guess you're never really a former officer of the military, right? But veterans and such who are really upset about what's happening. They're trying to save the military in ways that I think you'll be proud of because they're continuing their service to the country. And so Judicial Watch was honored to be able to represent them in this case. And we've been able to get records from the Air Force Academy that are really outrageous in nature and should have should engender an immediate response from Congress and other responsible officials. So there was 167 pages of records from the U.S. Department of Defense. So we had to sue the Pentagon to get the Air Force Academy records that show that the Air Force Academy has made race and gender instruction, that radical theory of radical racial theory, radical feminist theory, a top priority in the training of cadets. The records include recommendations that the Academy considers Behavioral Science 362, class, race, gender, and sexuality as a core class, that all curriculum be reviewed for diversity and inclusion topics, and that all cadets and staff be educated in specific D&I concepts and skills, that's advocacy, in order to decrease incidents of microaggressions, unconscious bias, etc. Microaggressions, unconscious bias. I mean, that's crazy talk from the left that accuses you of being racist when you're not actually being racist, and they have to come up with innocent acts and telling you you're racist even if you don't think you are racist and you've never done a racist thing in your life. Why are our cadets being abused by our military leadership? That's what I want to know. So this is the result of a lawsuit I think we filed last year, and I'm going to read you in detail some of what is uncovered here, because you're never going to read it or hear it anywhere else. And we'll provide obviously access to all the documents so you can see the damage and destruction directly yourself being foisted upon our poor cadets at the U.S. Air Force Academy. In an introduction to a September 2020 U.S. Air Force Academy Internal Racial Disparity Review, by the way, this is like a general document that STARS and Judicial Watch had to sue for. Why did we have to sue for it? Because you're going to find out it's outrageous, and they know it's outrageous, and this is why they try to hide it from us. So in the document, Superintendent Lieutenant General Jay Silveria writes, systemic racism exists in our society. Identity groups, whether based on race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or disability, have all experienced less than equal treatment in our nation, both historically and persisting in the present day. Ongoing events across our nation and around the world are a stark reminder that racism and social injustice continue to afflict our society. We must acknowledge that at the U.S. Air Force Academy, we are not immune to these issues. What happens outside our gates also happens across our installation and throughout the cadet wing. We would be naive to think otherwise and negligent to ignore the impact of racism and injustice on our cadets, our permanent party, and their families, and our entire Air Force Academy community. Now, what is that political, anti-American smear of the cadets doing in any government-funded, let alone military paper by someone who's charged with teaching our young leaders in the academy? To that end, I directed what I hope to be an enduring, lasting effort to promote racial understanding and diversity in the context of leadership. These actions include the establishment of a critical conversations working group. So the use of critical conversations, that word critical, that's not an accident. They know what they're talking about. That's the sort of consciousness raising, the critical race theory. Critical is you always have to be criticizing the institutions and yourselves and elevating your consciousness till you become the perfect communist man. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, this is the theory, led by the Center for Character Development. So the Center for Character Development, I presume, if it's in the U.S. Air Force Academy, is designed to teach core military leadership skills that can be used in matters of life and death. And they're changing it to include this racialism, this anti-Americanism, all to facilitate these discussions, recurring Air Force Academy-wide critical conversations for cadets and permanent party. And I presume by permanent party, I presume that means the staff and the professors and such at the academy. And if I'm wrong, say something below, but I think that's what it means. In addition, my Director of Staff and the Director of Equal Opportunity co-chaired an internal assessment and review for biases within our policies, processes, practices, curriculum, and artifacts. Artifacts. I don't know, are they destroying stuff at the Air Force Academy because there's implicit biases related to the historical artifacts they have? The objective of the assessment was to identify racial disparities unique to the Air Force Academy. Really, really awful stuff. And isn't that proof? What's going on there? There's another section under the heading Equal Opportunity and what their recommendations are. And this is the kicker. Consider implementing Behavioral Science 362, Class, Race, Gender, and Sexuality, as a core class, or pulling the content into shorter transition week training opportunities spread across a cadet's academy career. The material is highly regarded by cadets and graduates, and the information could be implemented on a larger scale to include training for basics and sessions for each year's group to help cadets mature into D&I, diversity and inclusion professionals for the Air Force. So they want to use the Air Force Academy's training program to train these political commissars to enforce more of this Marxist critical race theory on the rest of the Air Force. In a section entitled The Way Forward, the review introduces a triple threat group, which was established in June 2020 after, quote, national conversations surrounding police brutality, release of news articles addressing racial disparities in the Air Force discipline system, and the height of racial tension. The review continues, triple threat's ongoing efforts align theory and considerations on how the U.S. Air Force Academy could address racial tension and unrest using a three-tiered triple threat approach of acknowledgement, action, and advocacy. I mean, they're just trying to train Marxist cadres through this system. And I tell you, if it's not shut down, our military is going to be destroyed, or even worse, be used against America. In clarifying the need to address this issue, as well as to demonstrate the importance of these efforts, Triple Threat solicited shared stories from current cadets and graduates from the past year that captured realities and perceptions that bring awareness to the Black experience. And they capitalize Black, which is racialist, by the way. And if you capitalize Black or white, you're buying into leftist theory and you're dehumanizing all Blacks and all whites. It's very South African apartheid in terms of language use at the U.S. Air Force Academy. And it gets worse. I mean, you know, I was going through the release again, and, you know, I go through and say, well, what am I going to share in the update? And I'm going to go, oh, I got to share this. Oh, I got to share this. I got to share this. And before you know it, my head's going to explode because it's so outrageous. And I've already seen this, and I get outraged again every time I read it. Well, that's why I'm getting a little heated. That's why it looks like I'm going to pop. It's because I know our cadets in the Air Force Academy right now are being abused. And our country is being harmed, and our military is being undermined by this whole process designed to transform our military from an effective fighting force into a political force against the American way. Also in this section, again, entitled Recommendations, this is what they're recommending. And you can bet it's all being implemented. So what had happened was Trump had tried to stop a lot of this. I think he put forward a lot of regulations, or at least rules or executive orders, to try to stop this in, I think it was in 2020, right? And as soon as Biden came in, all bets were off, and it became the guiding force, this critical race theory. Ensure diversity and inclusion is incorporated in U.S. Air Force Academy guidance and policy. The Academy's Diversity and Inclusion Plan must be updated as a strategic document guiding diversity and inclusion efforts across the institution. Now, when they say diversity and inclusion, they don't mean diversity and inclusion. They mean critical race theory that attacks individuals and classifies them according to race, is anti-American, and has nothing to do with diversity and inclusion. It's about alienating the military from the America that it's being asked to defend. Expand the Dean of Faculty-led curriculum review to ensure all curriculum, as identified under the course of instruction, is reviewed for diversity and inclusion topics. All curriculum. So that means mechanical engineering, that means math, that means biology. What does that mean? You know, the Air Force, I presume, has special forces training. How's that going to work? My gosh. We're supposed to be training these men and women to be able to defend, again, America in life and death situations. Instead, we're turning them into little political commissars. And it's going to get people killed.